It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out, and this is kind of a surprise Instagram Live. I recently met this amazing person named Federica, and she's going to come on now and talk to me. We actually couldn't figure out what we were going to talk about because there's so many things that there she is that we have in common, especially regarding and hopefully will pop on. But Federica and I met, there she is, in like a speed dating situation, and it was instant love. I know that's like toxic relationships, but this wasn't that kind of thing, right, Federica? It was just instant like soulmate connections.
Absolutely.
And so I won't get, we're going to get into your background in a second. But one of the things that we talked about, especially just a few minutes ago, is how victims of domestic violence often minimize. Can you talk a little bit about that, like what you've seen, and then we'll get into like who you are and what you do. But how often do domestic violence victims, men and women, minimize?
All the time. All the time. And especially there's this misconception that if it's not overt physical abuse, that it doesn't count. And I couldn't disagree more. There's always this sense of I'm sorry, I shouldn't be taking up space here.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. When you've been made to feel like you don't deserve to take up space within your own intimate relationship, the place where you absolutely should be free to be yourself and take up space. How hard is it then to show up in the world and ask for help and feel like you deserve to take up space everywhere, which you do?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mentioned to you, that we have this weekly legal abuse support group. And when we started it a little over 3 years ago, there was someone in the group who was saying, oh, I feel bad that my situation doesn't seem that serious. And then went on to describe being in a moving car with her ex who threw her out of the moving car. And she was apologizing and saying, I don't think mine's that bad.
Right. I've had somebody say something similar, like I don't think mine's that bad, and they almost died as a result of their intimate partner's abuse. And I had to gently say, like, you almost died. How much worse does it need to get?
Yeah.
I had who had their family threatened, with a gun, her dog threatened, threatening to take her disabled brother away. How much worse does it need to get than that?
Yeah.
Um,
You wonder about like the tolerance that we develop in these difficult relationships where we can just take so much.
we're incredibly, I think, as people, we're incredibly resilient. That's something that I think is always really awe-inspiring about working with survivors. I remember when I started working at a nonprofit that worked specifically with survivors of sexual violence and trafficking, people thought like, oh, you must get really burned out. But to be honest, it was never the direct services, it was never the survivors that burned me out. It was always the bureaucratic nonsense or the feeling of wanting to do more and having your hands tied behind your back. Survivors are such a group of amazing, resilient people that I was always kind of more in awe of the resiliency of the human spirit and also the grace, like meeting folks that have been through absolute hell and still found it in their hearts to have so much grace, sometimes for their ex, for everybody around them, so much gratitude for the people trying to help them and advocate for them, when it would have been perfectly understandable, in my opinion, for them to be like, I hate everyone and I never want to see another person again. And I would be like, you know what? Fair. After what you've been through, totally fair.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. What a great point, because you're describing all of our clients. Well, not all of them, but most of them. Some people slip through that we're not thrilled about. But yeah, we call them our sweetie pies. They are the nicest, kindest, most responsible, creative, funniest people. We get to work with the best people in the world, and they are blaming themselves for being targets. And we're like, this is why you're a target, because you're so amazing. You make an energy vampire look good. That's why they went for you, not because you're horrible and weak,
You
right?
read my mind. That's exactly what I was going to say, that a lot of the folks that, in my opinion, the folks that perpetrate this kind of abuse are cowards, and they're folks that are filled with such insecurity and self-loathing for reasons that you might understand, and frankly sometimes I don't care to, because it's not an excuse. but that when they see somebody else shine, stealing their light is the only way they know how to exist in the world. And
Right.
so, you know, and taking that light for their own and destroying it in somebody else, like that's just what they do. And so I couldn't agree with you more that it's not because there's anything wrong with you. It's because you shine so brightly that they saw your sparkle and they were like, ooh, I want that. But instead of investing in becoming beautiful humans on their own and doing that work, they're like, oh, I'll just go take it.
Right. Right. Exactly. So, Federica, now can you please introduce yourself and tell everyone why you're so, I mean, you're going to be like, stop, but why you're so spectacular? You've got this really rich background, and that's why we had our love at first sight moment.
Really appreciate that. My path was kind of like this, but I ended up entering the nonprofit world after college, after experiencing, you know, abuse myself, and I felt like I need to do something about this. It's the only way that I can make it make sense for me is to try to create some meaning. By no means does it make it worth it. Please don't get me wrong here. Um, but I thought if I can use this experience to help other people, then at least for me, that gives it meaning. And everybody heals differently, but that's what was healing for me. Um, and then I entered this world and I was alternately in awe and inspired and horrified and so angry and so many things, all of the feelings in this roller coaster. And I thought, you know, I knew that it was going to be something that I was involved with in some way for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Um, and
So,
even after I left the nonprofit, after a really severe traumatic brain injury, I would have people coming to me, even though I wasn't in that role anymore. I'd have acquaintances and friends of friends experiencing abuse in some kind, and people would reach out to me and say, "Hey, I know you know about this stuff. Can you help?"
can you tell little bit about what you did, even though you're working for a nonprofit involved in domestic violence, but you did stuff after hours? Like, what kinds of work did you do that people were relying on you for your expertise?
Yeah, so we worked with survivors of sexual violence primarily, but there's a lot of overlap, as we all know. And we were the only organization that had 24-hour advocates on call. So a lot of times we kind of picked up the overflow from the DV world as well because nobody else could come, at least not after hours. So during the day, I was the volunteer coordinator and trained folks for our hotline, and during the among other things, and then during nighttime, I was like, sound like Batman. It's not how that's not how it felt. When your pager goes up at 2 in the morning, it doesn't feel like Batman anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but after hours, we would offer medical advocacy. So that meant showing up at the hospital whenever anybody came in with a report of abuse and talking them through their rights and their options. That looked like emergency after hours restraining orders. It could look like a lot of things. We were basically, it was actually a really, really amazing position to be in, an amazing organization where we were really only accountable to the survivors' wants and needs. So we were able to go in and say, hey, these are your rights. This is the kind of buffet of options available to you. And we don't have to answer to shareholders. We don't need to answer to the, you know, police. We don't need to answer to the hospital. And we would kind of be there and be like, hey, all these folks are trying to help you, but they do have different stakeholders. Our only stakeholder is you. So we are here to go to bat for you and make sure that whatever happens is as close to what you want as possible. And to make sure that you are getting access to everything that you deserve and everything that you're entitled to legally.
Yeah. So you did help with the medical stuff, but you also would go into court with people, right?
In the nonprofit, I actually did not because temporary restraining orders were always done at the police station after hours.
Okay.
And then one of our advocates would go to court. But after I left the nonprofit, I had occasion to start going to court with people because, like I said, acquaintances started reaching out to me and they lived in different counties than the nonprofit that I worked at and they needed support and they couldn't find it. So I
So
stepped in.
I want you to talk about what kinds of support you did, even though I know you personally can't do this now, but just these are the kinds of things that may be available for other people in different places.
Absolutely. So a really important piece, as banal as it sounds, is documentation. we'd sit down with someone, they'd share what was going on. And a lot of the times, it's not instinctive, right? You're being traumatized. It's not instinctive to think, oh my God, I need to keep detailed records of place and time and location of every single incident, even when it's just, loitering outside my window. But that's so helpful from a legal perspective. It tells a story and it lends credence, not that anybody should be doubting you, but it lends credence to everything that you say if
Mhm.
you have documentation. So the first step with all of the cases that I worked on was telling them, okay, what about this do we have documentable proof for? And how do we compile all of that together? And a lot of times, how do we do that in a way that isn't re traumatizing for you as the survivor? So, with one person, for example, they kept deleting their text messages. And I was really happy that they didn't even know that it was getting backed up to the cloud. So I was like, you know what? Keep deleting them for your mental health, but just don't
Mhm.
turn off that backup button. And
Right, because there's the evidence to strengthen your case. So even though it's so painful to look at it, you need it.
oh, that was actually such a beautiful case because her abuser was very, very stupid. And thankfully, I love it when they're stupid. And he was just very, very detailed in his messages. And I was like, this is fantastic. You're doing all of my work for me. But we were able to print out this beautiful, text history. And then I was able to annotate it, going through the statute of what represents stalking in Vermont, where I am, and different abuse statutes. I was able to point out and annotate it for the judge with the name of the statute, and basically just be like, "Look at this evidence. Would you not agree that this is an example of blah 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 blah?" And it was so clear when we got to court. At first, the judge is a little bit standoffish and kind of hemming and hawing, and then he started looking through this paperwork, and he was just like, "Okay, you've got it." And we got this guy's gun taken away, which was so exciting. So
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I love too how one of the things that Chris and I work with people on is something we call targeted documentation. So you're describing exactly that. You're describing not just like, here's my journals and everything that happened of the entire relationship, but taking communication between these two people and connecting the dots for a judge, applying it to the law, applying it to very specific statutes so that you make the judge's job easy to rule in your favor because you give the information. Judges, I've been to like one family law conference in particular where judges were talking and they were saying, if you're not getting anywhere, use the law. Like, give me the law, like the statutes. So it makes it easier for me because I'm not like memorizing everything.
Totally. And because it can be so hard, you're telling something that is so emotionally loaded that it can be very hard for the judges, to be fair to them, to parse through that. But they need to be objective, and I'm sure that there's many cases where they're horrified and they want to do something, but they're listening for those like key points that are actionable for them. And if they don't hear it, their hands are tied, and maybe it's there, maybe it's just not being phrased in the right way to set off those alarm bells to be like, ooh, ding ding ding, cross this line right here. And so, like you said, if we can connect those dots and be like, they did this here, and this here, and this here, and this here, then they're like, oh, this is amazing. It's not that they don't care about the story. I think a lot of them really, really do, or they wouldn't have gotten into that field. But, you know, that way they're like, oh, this is actionable for me. And I can go into my legal brain and know exactly what I can do for you.
I love how you've described it because that's exactly how people are persuasive. So you're talking about being objective versus emotional. Of course, it's normal to be emotional. Like, how can you not after what you've been through? But that's another thing that Chris and I work with people on is proper presentation. We say we want the judge to like you or the evaluator like you, so they believe you. And people come in where they're like, well, I just have to tell my truth, and people should understand that. But often, like one of the things we work on is teaching rhetoric and the elements of persuasion. And there's something called pathos, and that's the emotions around with which facts are presented. If you are hysterical, no one's going to listen. And you know that Chris and I live, well, I still consider myself a New Yorker, even though I'm right over the border, but we live near New York City, and there's lots of people in the streets screaming stuff. that they believe is really true, and nobody pays attention because it's the manner with which that information is being presented. It's the same thing in court. So with what you're describing, by taking the facts, removing the emotion to this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened, and then connecting it to legal statutes, that's what makes it easy for a judge to rule in your favor, because judges have to follow the law. Right. And it makes you more likable to a judge. But it's hard. That's why people need help doing this. You're not expected to do something like this yourself. You're not expected to know the laws, especially in moments like this.
Absolutely. And it's so, unfortunately too, there's also still so many misconceptions, you know, I about what being emotional means. Like there's still, it gets weaponized so often, right? And
yeah,
there's still so many misconceptions. So unfortunately, at least I haven't found that it's the norm for people to say, of course this person is emotional, sometimes to the point of incoherence because they've been through hell. Instead, they're like, oh, maybe this person is the problem, and which should not be the reaction, but sometimes it is. And so as unfair as it is, sometimes it's just like, you know, don't give them that weapon to use against you.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I'm thinking of an interview I did with a psychologist, a children's play therapist named Dr. Jill Leibowitz. And she said the children are her clients, but she meets with parents. And she said for a long time, when she dealt with domestic violence, the victim presents as so emotional that she think that they are the problem. And she said, I started realizing that wasn't the case, that a lot of times the parent that seems crazy at the beginning is not. It's just all that emotion has taken over. So that's something to keep in mind for us who don't have time to get to know, to have a long-term relationship with our child's therapist. But when you go to court or when you're presenting to an evaluator, you've got like one chance to make that first impression. And so it's so important to be ready to do that properly and to make an excellent first impression. Otherwise, we have to do an image rehabilitation.
And to be clear, like, you know, I want everybody to know that I'm not saying this from some kind of pedestal. I've been there. I've been in moments where I've been so triggered, had all my buttons pushed, that I danced like a puppet. I could not articulate myself. I didn't even, I like left the conversation not even understanding what the heck had just happened, what we talked about, like just this feeling of being completely railroaded and feeling like you're wrong and maybe you misunderstood, but you don't even know what just happened. It's a very particular kind of confusion that is so hard to explain to people that haven't lived it.
Oh my gosh, this is something that comes up all the time also with our clients and in our support group, where they'll go to court and the experience of being in court is so traumatizing that even when they've done well, they still feel bad. And so then we do like debrief sessions where we go through like, what do you remember? Like what happened, and like process, like you actually did really, really well, because they're just so terrified. People hold their breath for days sometimes after this. Like I always say, the night after court is worse than beforehand, because we're trying to process what happened. And like the judge said this, and maybe they made some negative comment about me, and oh my gosh, I feel terrible, or I should have said something different, and what if I missed out? Like it's just this constant swirl. It's so hard. So we often with our clients, we'll meet with them after court. We'll meet before court to prepare, and then we'll meet after court to sort of decompress, because it is so traumatic having to go to court.
Yeah, it's really, it's a lot. It's a lot, and people don't realize how it does make you question your reality and yourself and your own judgment, and how disorienting that is. You know, we talked about people minimizing everything that isn't really overt physical abuse. And to be clear, I'm not minimizing overt physical abuse, but I think we can all agree that when bruises fade, it's the emotional wounds that linger, and so it's always been shocking to me how easily people can dismiss that emotional and psychological abuse, because that's the invisible scarring that doesn't heal unless you get help for it. It's not like a bruise that'll just fade.
Right. And people who don't understand don't pay attention. They don't take it seriously. They'll be like, why don't you just get over it? Like, it's been a year. Why are you still worried about this?
Right. And they don't realize how insidious it is. But, I really believe that and the physical manifestations of it. It's such a vicious circle. We're not made to live in fear for that
Mhm.
long. The body isn't meant to live in that high adrenaline, high cortisol state all the time. People don't realize how that rewires your nervous system and how it just reconditions you. And it's all, in a way, it's like this beautiful protective response, right? But it's so harmful. Your lizard brain is trying so hard to keep you safe. And it's also like the most inconvenient thing it could possibly do in that moment.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the mindset that people have for their abuser, which seems kind of counterintuitive. What have you noticed with that, especially in the work that you've done?
Well, I think I shared with you that a lot of the times, um, I don't know if you mean like their perception, their feelings towards their abuser. Is that what you?
Yeah, yeah.
People have a
Talking
really
about
hard time.
minimizing again.
Yeah, people have a really hard time understanding that a person can still feel deep love for an abuser, and that love is real, and that a lot of times survivors present and with so much grace towards their abuser, like, oh, but they've been through this, or they had a really tough childhood, or they were really stressed, or blah 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 blah. And then at one point it's like, okay, but you've now been through this horrific abuse, and are you now going out and subjecting other people to that? And most of the time the answer is no. And it's like, okay, so that's a choice you're making, and their behavior is a choice they were making. But um, a lot of times survivors have this incredible empathy for their abuser, which is really kind of beautiful if you take it out of context, right? Like, it's incredible that you can feel that much compassion. I think it says a lot about their generosity of spirit. And also it can make it really hard for folks to get what they deserve, because they don't want to hurt their abuser. They still have so much understanding, or they might be willing to keep making excuses and go back and think of why it's reasonable that this happened, when it's not. It's an excusable full stop always. Like, it's
Right.
just,
Well, I mean, that's we know how many times on average it takes to actually extract oneself from one of these types of relationships, and a lot of it has to do with that empathy or hope that it's going to get better, or this is just a one-time thing or a few times. And
a lot of these folks that are abusive, they have this split self, right? And the self that drew you in is incredibly charming and incredibly seductive and romantic and supportive and makes you feel like you're the center of the universe. And then they take it away. And it's hard for people, I think, to understand that you can still love the person you thought they were. I think that's something else too. People don't realize that you need time to grieve the relationship you thought you had, the partner that you thought you had. Sometimes it's not even about that split self. Sometimes it's about all the hope that you built up when you met them, and they made you feel the way they made you feel. And then it's accepting that this person isn't who you thought they were, and that person doesn't really exist, that person is not real, that you're in love with a ghost. You're not, that person doesn't exist. They can't come back because they're not real.
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm taking so many notes. Federica, like in love with it. Like, I mean, one of the things you didn't mention is that your background is also as a writer, and so you're very descriptive. But I love that line, like being in love with a ghost. That's
And that love
beautiful.
is so real. And I think it is important to take time to honor that, and also not let it stop you from getting the justice and the care that you deserve. um,
Yeah.
and I think something that's really important in my experience, and I know that somebody who's in it might not like to hear this, but in my experience, when abusers come back and they're saying all the right things, and, oh my God, please forgive me, I'm going to do better. They might even go to therapy for a little while. They might, present like they're doing all of the things. And in my opinion, it's because the one thing that is most intolerable to them is losing. It's not about you. It's not about loving you. It's about winning.
Mm.
The fact that they didn't win. They were in control, and when you left, you took that control away. And that is intolerable to folks that perpetrate this kind of abuse.
Oh my
So
gosh,
it's not about getting
so
you
well
back.
said.
It's about winning. They'll
Yeah.
do anything to win. And then once they have you back, they'll go right back to who they are.
Yeah. I'm going to call that the harsh Vermont reality check. We always call it the harsh New York reality check, but that came from you and you're in Vermont. And that's true. Like that it is about winning. It's not about you. It's about winning back the control. And you have nothing to do with it. You're basically a
You
prop.
are. You're a pawn.
Yeah.
You're a pawn.
Wow.
They don't they don't care that you're happy. They don't care. I mean, they're performing to get you where they want you. Because how dare you? How dare you assert yourself and assert your autonomy and assert your worth in a way that they don't want and make them feel small. They can leave, but you can't leave.
Right. No matter who caused the problem, you're not allowed to be the one. That's why they want to be the one discarding you.
Right, right. They might divorce you, but it's on their terms when they want, how they want. You know,
Right.
God forbid it's on your terms.
And you deserve nothing.
Yeah, and God forbid you're okay after they if they decide to leave. God forbid you be happy and have a thriving, robust life.
Well, that's like the nature of what Chris and I work on with legal abuse, because we say once they don't have you in the day to day, they're limited to three things to abuse you with: money, kids, and the courts. And money and the courts go hand in hand. And we'll get into financial abuse in a minute if I can ever like get myself out of this part of the conversation. And kids last the longest, and that's something that Chris and I are working on this book on, online course, whatever. But let's talk about money and financial abuse in terms of how abusers continue to abuse post separation, because that's like what you work with at this point.
And I pivoted into the world of finance originally by necessity. As you know, I needed something that I could do remotely as I healed my body from chronic illness and a traumatic brain injury. Um, and then very, very quickly, I realized that money is so rooted in people's most visceral feelings of safety and consequently also in their most visceral feelings of fear, right? It's primal. At the top of the hierarchy of needs is our basic needs for food, shelter, and you need money to have those things.
Yeah.
Abusers know that. And there's often so much control within the relationship. So as a society, there's so much baggage around money, right? It's taboo. We don't talk about it. It's dirty, but we all want it, but we're not supposed to want it. It's just, there's so much there to unpack, just even as a person going through the world who has not experienced abuse. Then you experience abuse and money becomes a symbol of worth. Like if they're the primary breadwinner, then you deserve everything that happens to you because they're supporting you.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a way to control you and shame you and humiliate you. Like, oh, you need your needs met? You need to bow to me so that I, the benevolent master, can give out resources. And that's often a position that abusers don't want to give up, even after divorce. And so, every little thing that you need, I'm going to make you absolutely beg for it. And you're going to have to suffer for it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so you need.
I'm getting goosebumps. Totally. Like all the time. Like, and beg is the perfect word, especially post separation, because I think about the co-parenting issues between a lot of our clients, extracurricular expenses, having to beg the other side to share the costs of uniforms.
You're like, wait, where are your clients that they have unicorns?
Yeah, but like every little thing, it's like, can't we just do what our agreement that we agreed on? Like, can't we split the cost? Like, why am I having to beg for every little thing for our child? It's not for me, it's for our child. But that's exactly what it is. It's so exhausting.
Love it. And I use beg intentionally, and the worst part is that they, in my opinion, and in my experience, they like, it's not even just begging the way we use that word, you know, colloquially, where it's like, oh, I beg you, please do this. It's a degrading experience. It's denigrating. Like they want to continue to rob you of your dignity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how can you say no? Again, when we've talked about when money is this thing that you need to live and be okay in the world.
Yeah.
So their trump card. And
Yeah,
it's
and I think about another thing that one of our clients gave us this line, and I thought, oh, this is perfect. Their ex is always threatening to make them homeless, penniless, and or childless, meaning turn the kids against them. But homeless and penniless both have to do with money. And it's terrifying. I mean, that's the thing that a lot of our clients exes say, men and women. Of course, women tend to be the non-money spouse more frequently, but it's like if you leave me, you're going to be out on the street.
absolutely.
And I'm going to keep the kids because the kids aren't going to be out on the street with you.
Exactly. And knowing too that a lot of times, abuse comes with so much expense in the sense of like, you know, how much how much mental health care do you need? And systemically, a lot of times, we don't get coverage for that or not enough. And then also, we've talked about the physiological toll it takes on your body. I can't tell you how many survivors I've seen with autoimmune diseases,
Oh,
chronic, and all.
skin, skin stuff, like shingles. I mean,
Mhm,
fibromyalgia is really common. Stuff with the kidneys,
mhm. And all
cancer.
is so expensive, and it limits your ability to be out there earning an income separate from your partner. And
Yeah,
so it can feel
yeah,
like this cycle of, oh my God, I mean, I've been there through my experiences with chronic health stuffs too. There's nothing more frightening than feeling like your body is failing you or like it can't do the things that you need to do. And then you also have that monetary strain on you, that like kind of sort of Damocles hanging over your head. You're just waiting for it to drop, and then you think, "Oh my God, I'm going to be out on the street and sick. Oh my gosh, how am I going to survive that?" And a lot of times, it's not, it's just, it's so reprehensible and disgusting. I can't emphasize this enough, but it happens so often within the relationship, after the relationship, during the divorce, post divorce. It's just like this trump card that they love to use. And so if we can find a way to take it away, it's so liberating.
yeah. So tell us what you do, Federica.
So you,
Beautiful lead in.
um, thanks to you, I connected with Story, this incredible woman that created this program called Detour, um, that kind of guides you through mapping out the financial aspect of your divorce through from a divorce attorney's perspective. I think this has a lot of other applications, but it also, in a very conversational, non-overwhelming way, it guides you through gathering all the information that a lawyer often needs to help you. And lawyers aren't financial people. And um, as awful as it sounds, dissolving a marriage is not that different from liquidating a company, right? Like, you created this company when you married a person, and now you're not, and you're liquidating all the assets and dividing them up. And if you can't see the big picture, and if you can't map out what you had before, take into consideration also non-monetary factors that the courts consider. Like, um, you know, I had an experience recently where somebody was being threatened with the loss of their home, and we stopped to talk about it, and I was like, wait, didn't you support your partner when they got through their education? Oh yeah, wait, I did. Oh, okay. Didn't you move away from a very high paying job to move to where you are now, and didn't you make a deposit on the house? Oh yeah, I did. Okay. Then like all of that counts. All of that counts.
Yeah. People don't realize that.
As the non-supporting, or as the non-primary breadwinner, which, like you said, typically tends to be women, um, they, you don't consider your labor, your years of labor, and of foregoing earning an income for yourself, or, advancing your earning potential. You don't consider that as like a monetary sacrifice, right? But it does have value to it. If you were
Significant.
not making it possible for your spouse to advance in their career and not have to think about the kids or the house or all these things that you're doing, then, and this goes for stay-at-home dads too, then, if you were out there working, how much would you have had to spend in childcare? How much would you
Hmm.
have had to spend in all these other things that you were taking care of? How many promotions would they not have been able to get because they had to leave work early to pick up the kids?
Hmm.
People don't consider all of the ways into maybe your partner got where they are because you were taking care of everything else. That has
And
value.
right. And so you are able to help people put that into powerful, targeted documentation because you've got
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
writer skills and you've got the math skills and the bookkeeping skills and now the software. And by the way, Story Jones, who developed Detour Life, is someone that we met in as part of what we belong to, the Amicable Divorce Network, which focuses on child-centered divorce. And we like to say we meet professionals who put a fence around legal abuse, who try to keep you out of court so that you save time and money and energy and have the power in your own hands and your family's hands rather than leaving it up to strangers to decide. So now you're part of this, like contributing to helping reduce litigation costs and all of the emotional costs that aren't just on the parties, but that trickle down onto their children, which leads to intergenerational trauma. So
Absolutely.
this is a really big deal.
And thank you for giving me the idea, because it is such a perfect pivot from what I do for small businesses to still helping this community that is so close to my heart. And it's a lot of the times, like we said, money becomes this weapon, but when sometimes putting it into something like Detour Life takes the emotion out of it and helps you see objectively, like, okay, what do I need, and what how much you know am I getting myself into a situation that's difficult? For example, like if I'm keeping the house, can I afford to maintain it? Or is that just going to be this huge albatross around my neck? And maybe it's better to just let it go and split the proceeds. Or if they're offering to pay me X amount, will that really sustain me and my kids in this house that we're going to be renting? Or does it need to be more? And and sometimes it really drives the point home of like when you were a company, quote unquote, and sharing all of these expenses, you know, these things were being paid for anyway. It's not like this, like one spouse is like getting anything. It's not
Yeah,
like, oh,
right.
I'm not
It's
giving
just like
back to
keeping
them.
the ship afloat
Exactly.
together. Yeah, and what you're talking about with what you do and with Detour, it takes the emotion out of like financial and business decisions, like logistical things that we always think about how during divorce and separation and custody battles, you're being asked to make significant decisions during some of the most raw moments of your life. And so it's really hard to make decisions, but having a tool like this or professionals like you, Federica, helping them, it makes it more like a little, we always say emotionally distant, where you can just sort of be like, okay, now it's on paper. It's not just in my head.
Totally. And sometimes, as counterintuitive as it sounds, right? Like so many of us have so much fear around money and around the loss of money. But sometimes seeing the numbers on paper makes them way less scary. Like sometimes when you actually can look at them and break them down, and that's a lot of what I do for businesses and individuals. It's like, hey, look, that big scary number, we can break that up and suddenly it looks manageable. Suddenly, we can plan this and break it out into little chunks. And I try to do it in a way that's really supportive and transparent and cognizant of that psycho emotional response we all have to money, because I think that's where a lot of financial folks struggle, is that they might be numbers people, but they're not people.
Right.
Um, and
And you're a
I'm
DV
lucky.
person. So that's our community. That's why, you know, I said the word unicorn before as like whatever the word is, but like where you say the wrong word, but it's like a not a
Freudian.
slip. It's not a Freudian slip because it wasn't sexual, but but it was something malapropism. Um, but you are a unicorn because you are a financial specialist, but you've got a background in DV. So you're able to approach this with that sensitivity, and you are obviously trauma informed, because so many of our clients are paralyzed when it comes to putting financial documentation together. Paralyzed.
Understandably.
They could do the custody stuff, they could do the journaling about parenting time, but the financial, it's not even just that they're scared because of the money and losing it. It's because they haven't been part of the conversation. They don't know. I mean, even the most brilliant, successful people, often the dynamics of a marriage or a relationship is one person has the knowledge and the other person doesn't. That's present in 99% of abusive relationships, financial abuse. I mean, in my own relationship, my ex owned multiple properties and was like, yeah, you don't need to worry about that. And the taxes, I have an accountant and, all this other stuff. And, I'm going to put stuff in my retirement account and use your money to pay the bills, but it's going to be your money too. Like, I was
Right.
like, oh, okay, you do that. And of course, to my
And
detriment.
here's the thing too, is that, I kind of want to dispel this myth for everybody. I try to do that in my work with small businesses too, that this is everybody. We have a chronic financial illiteracy problem. And this included me. I mean, like, I do this for a living now, and I did not know. And still, there's so much I do not know because we don't get taught this. It should be part of our primary education, and it's not.
Yeah.
We all reach adulthood, and nobody knows, how to read the tax code. Nobody knows how to pick an insurance plan. Half the time, people don't know how to, read their pay stubs or what any of this stuff means. We're not prepared to take ownership of our financials, and then we're taught that it's this important thing, but it's this important thing that nobody really talks about. So it's like murky and hidden behind this veil. And the truth is, it's not that hard. And I shouldn't say it's going to put myself out of business. It's not that complicated. There's very little math involved. If you can add and subtract, you can absolutely manage your finances. I promise.
But
And
you can do it for them. You can do it for them
yes,
if they can't. Because right now they can't add and
yes,
subtract, and that's okay.
fair. That's fair. But I just wanted to say that it's not even like, oh, this is happening to me because I've been abused. It's like, no, this is happening to you because you're a person. Like most people, there's no shame involved in not knowing these things because 90% of Americans don't.
Right, right. And our audience is global, so it's not even Americans we're talking to.
Oh, well, that's amazing. Well,
Yeah,
I think globally it's probably very similar. I think in some other countries there probably is some element of this in the curriculum of primary education. But either way, it's complicated and it's scary, and there's a lot of um, there's a lot of gatekeeping around that information too.
hmm
And I think that can be really intimidating too when you go to a professional that's just spewing acronyms at you and talking at you in industry lingo, and you're just like, I just want to know what this means for my life, like practically, right? I
yeah,
don't want to be looking at your spreadsheets. I don't want to be looking at your charts. Like, I just want to know what this means for me. I'm
yeah,
not going to take this up as a hobby. I just want to understand my situation. And that's a lot of what I do. I like to bring clarity. So we need to understand where you are now and then look at where you want to go and break down that goal into actionable baby steps that make it feel attainable and actually do make it attainable. It doesn't just feel attainable, it is.
yeah, yeah. So how can people find you, Federica?
So right now you can find me on Facebook or Instagram under Quartermaster Bookkeeping. Um, I am going to be soon changing my name to Quartermaster Financial Solutions. So don't be scared if that happens. The logo will stay the same. It's still me. Um, and that's only because I'm offering these other services like this, assistance during the process of divorce, and also debt management is going to be something I'm going to be rolling out in the next month.
Okay,
Um,
great. Well, I am thrilled to find a unicorn like you in the finance space,
Likewise.
especially with the DV background and the sensitivity and everything that you bring to what you do. And I am really, really excited to be working together more in the future.
Me too. I was so delighted, and when you mentioned, hey, are you working with people that are getting divorced? And it was like this huge light bulb moment where I was like, wow, I am embarrassed that I never even thought of this. Like, it just never even occurred to me. And
This is like, you are perfect for this.
after
This is
you
perfect.
spelled it out, I was like thinking of people in my life too who would have benefited from having this service. And I was like, oh my God, yes, this is a thing. Of course it's a thing. How did I not even think of it as being something that was possible?
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to have to sign off soon because we're going to start with clients, but we are, everyone watching now and in the future, Federica and us are going to be working more together, especially with when you see our online course and just She's a wonderful person to help you if you feel like paralyzed with your documentation during the process of divorce. Like you've already seen her talking for this long. Like absolutely highly recommend this type of service to get through this.
I'm honored. And likewise, I just want to put out there too that if maybe you're post divorce, but you still feel like, okay, now you're managing the household finances and you've never had to before, and you feel like there's a really steep learning curve, I can help with that too. We can do a little bit of training, we can talk about what your goals are, and help get you set up so that you feel like you're driving your bus because you deserve that. I tell my business clients that accounting is just another language and that your money tells a story, and that if you can't read the story, then you're not writing your own ending. And the same goes for individuals. We all deserve to write our own ending. We don't want to leave that to the market or to chance or to other people. Um, you
Yep.
know,
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Federica, for taking the time, and we will
thank you,
definitely be back
Lisa.
together on here soon.
Thank you, Lisa. You're amazing. Everybody, I know you already know this because you follow her, but oh my gosh, what an incredible woman.
Thanks. All right. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay. Bye.